we are live. Hello, all newcomers, and welcome back, my fellow Aeternians. As always, it's me, Emperor AP. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We have President Stephen Luke of the Commonwealth of Dracul. He is here representing his people to talk about Dracul, to talk about recent relations issues between Dracul and Cycoldia, a neighboring micronation. And we are going to discuss the future of Dracul. So, that being the case, please welcome President Stephen.
Thank you very much for having me this evening. I'd like to personally take this time to thank you for providing us the platform to give our side of the account. Say some good things, of course, as well as, you said we'll be mentioning, of course, the positive, the good times that we had with Psycholia, and for your viewers. So thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. Now, everybody as well in the comments, please let us know if you can hear President Luke. I know I'm fairly close to the microphone, and this is the stream setup that we have tonight. But please let me know how you can hear President Luke. Of course, he is the main event here, so keep me updated on how he looks and how the sound quality is. I appreciate it, everybody. Okay, so that being the case, I am going to pull up a few questions that I had, but before I do, President Luke and I were having a fun conversation a moment ago, talking about previous micronations and talking about our responses to how our micronations have developed and stuff. We were actually talking about live streaming, and President Luke for a moment was saying how they had trolls during their um, during their micro workshop, and so that was something that was quite interesting to hear about. We actually, I believe, lost President Luke. I will have to check in on him, make sure everything is okay. Looks like he's just jumping back in with us. Oh, he's in the waiting room. Let me admit him.
Sorry about that.
Hey, President Luke, that's all right. Everything okay?
Oh yeah, everything is fine. I had a phone call come in, and I forgot to put my phone into do not disturb mode, so that's what ended up happening. But we're all good to go now. Sorry about that.
Fantastic, that's all right. Everybody as well just said you were a little bit hard to hear, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can't prop up my computer so it gives a little bit better sound quality, and then I'm going to make sure that your screen is in as full view as possible. Okay, cool deal. But yeah, I was just letting everybody know that we had that conversation about trolling and stuff. I wanted to ask you real quick before we get into the interview. Did that person actually end up showing up? Because I plan to watch the series.
No, unfortunately, they didn't. They didn't end up showing up. We had to. We actually had another micronationalist step in. I believe it was me, as a matter of fact. I believe I stepped in and covered heraldry for them.
Absolutely. Okay. Very cool. Well, I'm glad to hear that at least you got the topic covered and that everything worked out all right. Okay. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and get into some questions for President Luke. Let's see. So, I guess one of the things that I was curious about, we had talked a little bit before the stream about being leaders of micronations and talking about who we are as individuals. So, that being the case, being here tonight, do you feel like your views represent the people of Dracul? You're the president, you have connected to, I suppose, all Draculians in one way or another. What's your role here as President Stephen Luke, the individual, versus President Stephen Luke, the leader of the nation of Dracul?
Well, I think that's a great question. Me personally, my personal views do not represent Dracul because in 2017, when I created Dracul, I wanted Dracul to be represented by everybody and what Dracul's government structure stands by. So, in this this case, a republic, a democracy. So, we certainly weren't interested in anything like socialism, communism, oligarchy, monarchies. I felt there was way too many monarchies out there already as there are, and I said, let's do something a little bit different. So, we chose democracy. But what I get out of Dracul, as Stephen Luke, the individual, is I get a sense of community. I love the aspect that we can gather together physically here in Dracul. We can talk to one another, learn more about one another, our different cultures, our different lifestyles, things along those lines. So for me, it's more about the camaraderie and getting to know more people. And then, of course, the Stephen Luke president is about leading that community, uniting them together, which is, of course, that unification is what makes a community and makes it a successful one.
I think that's well said. Very nice. I also appreciate that for all of our viewers, that gives some perspective of Dracul as a democracy. So that's one of the things we also talked about before the stream. But every micronation is different. Every micronation has their own ways of governance, ways of doing things. So when you think about the different news stories that you hear about other micronations or about events that occur, take into account the framework of those nations. But that being the case, I would say, President Luke, for tonight, do you think you would be able to tell me in your own words some of the backstory behind your connection to Cycoldia, Dracul, and Cycoldia relations, and just what you feel led up to tonight?
Sure. Well, to start off, Dracul and Psycholia established towards the end of 2018, I believe it was, beginning of 2019. Of course, we learned about them through several other micronations. They had applied for recognition. And it was funny because, like you and I had talked about before the show, when they applied for recognition, we realized how closely they were to us, literally less than a mile from the Draculian borders. And of course, with most micronations not being that close to one another, it was a real treat to say that we formally recognize somebody right by our borders. So, we established relations with them. And believe it or not, it was a relation, a recognition that went so far back that this was before Christina was Christina. Before the transition. So, this actually, I still have old documentation with male name and everything on it. So we actually were allies with Cycoldia, and we actually watched her go through her transition, which, was like, right, bravo, if that's how you want to live, by all means, go right on ahead. We're fully supportive of it. Never said anything negative about it, and it lasted for quite some time. The other great thing about having Psycholia as an ally was not only having them so close, but the fact that because they were close, they were able to attend physical events of ours. They came to our Christmas party 2 years ago. Were entertained with all the other Draculians, and of course Christina was a Draculian as well. She was also held citizenship. So we're like, well, of course, not only do we have foreign dignitary here tonight, we've also got another citizen here. So that was great to have that. Micro summits when we had other micronationalists come to our embassy here. We invited her as well. There's a few pictures out there, of course, and then the Prison Military Academy. Unfortunately, the matter that brings us here tonight, which of course I'm going to cover, is that there was a disagreement between Christina and two other Draculians who they had difference in opinion on the subject of transgenderism. It started out with a situation where a new political party was founded in Dracul, the Blue Party of Dracul. And the Blue Party of Dracul announced that they were more of a Christian-based, somewhat conservative type of, I guess you would say, American type politics, those types of views. And that it concerned Christina because, as many people have seen, there are times where conservatives are not very open-minded about being of the LGBT community, especially the transgender community, things along those lines. They have different viewpoints than, other people with other political parties or no political parties at all. So it was a concern for her when she heard that. And, certainly I said, I think that needs to be addressed to reassure her that, as a citizen, that, she would not be discriminated against. And, of course, at that time, since they just started, there was no charter, there was no manifesto to explain what it was that the party actually represented. So she had nothing to go off of, and of course she was concerned. So Mr. Frederick of the Blue Party had explained to her that the party had no intention of discriminating against her, that the party did not have any intention, if they got into politics, of passing any laws in Dracul of discriminating against the LGBT community or even trans individuals, and that it wouldn't even be possible to do so because it violates Draculian law, because we are very tolerant when it comes to welcoming everybody in the community. And then unfortunately, a debate between Mr. Frederick Malfitano and Christina was mutually started in the Dracul server. And Mr. Frederick basically said, I don't understand this. This is something that I'm not really comfortable with. I'm not really open to accepting this. But I don't see how it's possible that someone could transition from one sex to another, because that seems to be so complicated. And I can understand that, from Christina's point of view, as someone who is trans, that would be very disappointing to hear somebody say. Unfortunately, that's the way the world is. Not everybody's going to agree with everybody. But that's basically what ended up happening. From what I was able to witness, Mr. Malfitano and Mr. Frederick were always referring to her by her pronouns. They did not use any form of attacks like "you're subhuman," "you should die," or "you're a terrible person," or "you have a mental retardation," or something like that. It was just simply them stating, "I don't agree with it. I don't understand how it's possible, and it's not something that I'm willing to really even get into, really." So after that matter, Christina, of course, being disappointed, as I would understand, basically felt that would contribute to a disruption in the Draculian government and what Dracul is for. And of course, I explained to her that there's not going to be any kind of law, especially as me being president, of anything like that being passed, because again, we're very tolerant. We welcome everybody here. So she, because of her frustration with the situation, she asked for them to be terminated, to be kicked off of my cabinet, which at the time they were not on a cabinet. Uh, One of them was on President Howie's cabinet because this was like 2 3 days before I was sworn in.
Mhm.
So I didn't really have any power to remove somebody from a cabinet.
Mhm.
So, but I told her, I said, you know, I can't remove somebody just because they have a difference in opinion. If they were to call you names, condone violence against you, threaten you in any way, then absolutely I would not tolerate that. And I would not have them on my cabinet by any means because of that. Um, she was not, unfortunately, she was not very pleased with that response from me. She wanted more to be done about it. And I said, it's probably best that you two just not talk about that issue, or really even communicate if y'all can't get along on any means, because you're just going to continue to have disagreement with one another. So she wrote statements on all individuals that were involved: Mr. Frederick, Mr. Amalfitano, Mr. Cooper, and myself, and basically was explaining in those statements that she was very displeased. She did not agree with their views. She felt that it was transphobic and homophobic, the things that they said, and that she didn't believe that they needed to be on my parliament or that they represented Dracul at all. And I told her, I said, Christina, this was a matter between you as a citizen and 3 other citizens. And, this disagreement is just between you two. This was here in Dracul in a private matter, a private debate. So let's not blow this out of proportion, because it's not going to do anybody any good to blow this out of proportion. And she ended up taking those statements and releasing them to Psycholia, to the rest of Psycholia. And I told her that it wasn't a good idea, because you bringing your problems that you had in Dracul over into Psycholia, you're now making this into an international incident, because it's going from Dracul to Psycholia. And Psycholia wasn't even involved in this matter, the citizens or the government itself. It was just simply Christina. So I said, while, I completely understand why you disagree with the situation, and you don't appreciate this, I don't think turning this into a big matter really is the way to go about doing this. And I would really caution you not to do this, because once this starts getting out, it's not going to be pretty between the both of us, because we're both going to be viewed as problems. Someone's going to see a problem with Psycholia doing this. Someone's going to see a problem with Dracul doing this. And it's not going to be a good idea. So she released the statements anyways, and the statements had been released as well on MicroWiki under the headlines, under the most recent headlines. So I said, well, she completely disregarded our advice. She feels this is necessary. I think it's probably best to let everyone know our point of view, have the KBRN News write an article on the situation, giving our account of the situation. And of course, shortly after, we released our statements on the matter along hers as well. And basically, the whole time that these statements were being released, I was trying to understand exactly what went wrong, and if we did anything wrong on our end. And I didn't see anything wrong on our end. Everyone was continued to show respect. People were like, this is very unfortunate. I don't understand why this is happening. And after the statements were released, it just really started to flame up on a really big level. And I said, if this is going to continue, we're going to have these issues, and you're not willing to come together to discuss some form of meeting in the middle, if you can't accept the olive branch, I don't understand why we need to remain, allies any longer. Um, this was unfortunately not the first time that Christina had written statements negatively about Draculians in the government or Dracul as a whole and released those statements publicly. This was actually the second or third time that this had happened. And I forewarned her in the past, last time it happened, said, look, if we're going to be friends, we can't treat each other like this. If you have a problem, you have a disagreement, you need to bring it to my attention, which she did. She did bring several incidents to my attention of people that she disagreed with in Dracul. I handled those as I felt to be necessary, which, from what I saw, were successful because those incidents between those individuals and Christina became fewer and became less minor, more minor than when tensions were high between those individuals. And my advice was completely disregarded in that matter. And things got blown out of proportion. Things were misconstrued. I do remember when I had checked in your interview when Christina was on, that she had mentioned that that I had said that she was pathetic and not worth talking to. But that's not what I said to her. I said, and this was when I was trying to have a logical, respectful conversation to try to restore what we still had left on a positive level. And I told her, I said, we were continuing to just go back and forth. We weren't getting anywhere. And I said, Christina, if we're just going to be going back in circles and you're not going to see our viewpoint on things, then I think that this conversation at this point is not worthy of having. It's not worthy of my time because we're going around in circles. So, as I had told you before we started the interview, people seem to think that I hate Christina as a person. That could be further from the truth. I do have to represent Dracul when they feel that they are under attack or slander. But at the end of the day, as I had told you, if Christina called me on my phone at 11 o'clock at night, she couldn't find a ride home from work, from the store or something, and a ride left her or something like that. She called me and she said, I don't have a ride. Can you come and pick me up? I don't live that far from you. Yes, absolutely. It would be the humanitarian and proper and righteous thing to do because that's a macro matter. I'm trying to show that there's a difference between having a conflict in a micronation and having a conflict on a personal level. Now, I don't hold anything personally against Cycoldia, but some of the ways that she went about doing things and disregarding my advice, which it fueled the flames, in my opinion, that I don't really look upon with kindness. But when it comes to a macro level, I don't have a problem with Christina at all. In fact, if she wanted to strike up a conversation tomorrow with me and asking me how the weather is over in my area and how work is, I wouldn't have a problem with having that conversation with her. It's just on that macro national standpoint where there's issue that should be addressed. And, hopefully when tensions continue to die down as they have been the past few weeks, we can have a truce and part separate ways, and unless we feel that there's something to reestablish again between the two nations. But at this point, it's I don't know. It would have to be a conversation you got to sit down and have with one another. I don't like to close the door if I can help it. I try to be open-minded. I try to be encouraging in these types of situations, but you won't know until you actually have that conversation if there's actually something worth salvaging, which for positivity's sake, I certainly hope in the future there is.
I appreciate that. Um, I appreciate the thorough accounting. If you don't mind, would like to kind of go through from a chronological standpoint. I think you gave a pretty good explanation of things, but just going through and kind of asking you questions on some of those specifics you mentioned.
Sure.
So, first off, you discussed a bit about Christina and her citizenship. But one of the things that I felt like wasn't super detailed was how did Dracul and Cycoldia first come in contact? What was the sort of inciting incident behind you learning about Cycoldia or Cycoldia learning about Dracul?
So, my goodness, this is so long ago. I don't exactly remember how it was that we met. I know that, of course, there had to have been some conversation that sparked it. Of course, this was back in like 2018, 2019. I don't remember because we've gone through so many treaties within the past 4 almost 5 years now. But it had to have been something positive because we both agreed upon it. And with that being said, things started off. Things weren't very strong, I would say. Not so much as like there was any problems or anything, but basically things didn't start off very strong because we really couldn't find anything to connect on. We formally recognized one another. We thought that was great. I don't believe communication really started with Psycholia until after Christina's transformation. And when that got started, it started out with general chit chat, conversation in the Discord. I think that was one of the big things that started the conversation was because Christina was so big into using Discord. When we finally got a Discord, because I was against Discord for the longest time. I said, no, I want people to be able to, meet in person, talk on the phone and everything along those lines. And then it got to the point where I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe you should try Discord because we were basically just using Facebook group chats, which, used to be a thing of the past, which Facebook, for some reason, they had gotten rid of, but then they brought back again. We were using that. And then when that got booted out by Facebook, we were like, okay, maybe we should, because we can use video, audio. When one person wants to be in the chat and talk, it's not going to ring everybody's phone. You can just hop in the voice chat and have continuous different channels to list things in instead of just one message board. I think that's what really brought Christina more connected with Dracul. And it started off, as I said, with just general chit chat, asking how each other's micronation was going, how we could benefit one another, and that right there is probably how we started.
I appreciate that. I know that's very similar to a lot of micronations.
Absolutely.
So then, can you tell us one of the things Christina brought up in the interview, which I thought was really interesting, was about the Dracul Christmas party as one of like the first times you guys had been able to meet in person. Can you tell me a
Yes.
little bit about that?
So we had 2 years ago we had a Dracul Christmas party. We didn't have several in-person events in Dracul because we typically don't have any towards the end of the year. We typically only have about three or four a year where we actually gather in person. And since, of course, we didn't have any holidays during that period, I thought, let's have a Dracul Christmas party. I think we can get enough people rallied around the idea to where they can, to where they will want to meet up. Of course, there's going to be free food. No one says no to free food. Free food, games. We had a raffle. I think we raffled off like a hot cocoa and s'mores kit that was about this big.
Oh wow.
We had that. I think there was 2 of them. But anyways, it was a raffle. We had Christmas music going on, chairs set up everywhere, a table with all of the little, like broccoli and the carrots and the dip and the chips and stuff and sandwiches laid out and everything. And, of course, the Christmas tree in the corner, which some people might be asking me, why do you still have your Christmas tree up? It's already February. And it's because of a very rarely celebrated holiday called Candle Mass, which is something that I partake in. It's mostly a European tradition. But we typically, with Candle Mass celebrations, don't take it down until February 2nd, which I know it's not February 5th, why you still have it up. Been busy with work. But anyways, I told her, I said, hey, you know what? We're having a Dracul Christmas party. You're not that far. Why don't you come on over? Dracul citizen, monarch, foreign dignitary. We haven't had a foreign dignitary. Came on over. Everybody else was here, already starting to gather around. She comes walking up in her big cape and everything, and she has her crown on and everything, and well done, Christina. Come on in, let's go. So she comes on in, gets to meet all the Draculians, all the individuals she's never met before. Seemed to have a great time, full of laugh, did her crazy laugh that she does, and she always gets me laughing. But so she had a great time. We were definitely glad to have her here. Consider her one of our own. Now, not just a dignitary, but one of our own citizens. And it was a great party. It lasted for about 3 to 4. It was about 3 to 4 hours. Got to meet the founding mother that finally made it over. It took her forever to get here, but she finally made it over. So it ended on a really good note.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. One of the things that she had shown me, which I just thought would be funny to show everybody, one, I have an image of the Dracul Christmas party, just so everybody can see it. It is President Luke and Her Majesty was Christina right there, posing with the cape and the Christmas tree, the same one that's in the corner. Very cool.
That's right.
Very cool. And in addition, Christina had to highlight in her interview that she had as well a Hershey Kiss mug that she had won, or that somehow she had gotten during the Christmas party. And I wanted to bring that up as well.
Yes. Yes, she did. I'm trying to think. I remember during the raffle contest, there was someone, a Draculian, of course. I believe it was at the time North Dracul Governor Gauthier. He had won the s'mores kit, and it came with 2 Hershey's. There it is, right there. 2 Hershey's mugs, and Christina didn't win anything. And Governor Gauthier opened up his kit, took out the Hershey's cup, and handed it to her and said, "Merry Christmas," and gave it to her. Very, very community-oriented, very kind gesture, the type of things that truly represent Dracul as a whole.
Absolutely. That was very, very cool. I had enjoyed the story, and I wanted to bring it up as well. Going into some further questions kind of around that time period. So I think you've pretty much summed it up, but can you tell me just that initial reaction, going from having met this person through the internet and having connected to Cycoldia, there actually to having met this person, I imagine it's now become your friend. What was that like? What did you think of Christina?
Well, Christina's always been an interesting individual, and not in the sense that she's transgender, but her personality. She's very outspoken. She's very energetic. She enjoys in a lot of the dark humor, which people mostly don't enjoy in. The things that she would laugh about that we could all enjoy would be other things that people couldn't. for instance, Mr. Cooper would say things like someone would say something, and Bruce would say, oh my God, I can't believe that. I think I have to hang myself now. And I'd say, that's Christina's job. And Christina would just bust out laughing over just that, But, an interesting character to say the least. You know, we scratched her back, she scratched ours. We invited her into our Prison Military Academy because, Psycholia has military. She wanted to learn more about having the leadership role in a micronation, being taught by real United States military veterans, having curriculum that was actually created by a military academy. And she did really well with that. She graduated valedictorian of the first class.
I actually, while we're on that, sorry, I do have an image of that. Just I felt it was appropriate timing.
No, absolutely. I do like this picture.
Yeah. Let me see if I can pull it up real fast. There we go. It's of Christina's Prison Military Academy diploma.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're quite all right. But she wanted to better herself. She wanted to be educated on the topic of the military, and that was to be commended. And so we welcomed her in, had no problem with that whatsoever. And as I said, she graduated, did really well, took that education and her awards back to Cycoldia. I'm sure they were cheering her on as she came back with all of those awards. She has a coat of arms, of course, for her heraldry, and for her monarchy status. And but she didn't have a seal. So to just see the coat of arms for someone who's never seen it before, they wouldn't know who to connect it to. So I said, well, why don't I create you a seal with your coat of arms in the middle of it, and it could say Christina the First, Grand Republic of Psycholia, and it can connect the heraldry to not only you but Psycholia. And she was like, oh yeah, I'm down with the idea. I'd love that. So it took me about 30 minutes to an hour to get everything detailed to her liking, and sent it over, and she loved it. That was one thing. And then of course, as I had mentioned previously before we started, we had in the military ribbon bars, physical ribbon bars for you to wear on your uniform when you earn something. And she earned several of them, of course, in prison, but she also wanted to help Dracul out because we didn't have digital files of those. And a lot of the micronationalists in Dracul wanted to be able to put their full ribbon bar on their micro wiki page to show what they had earned, like as many people put their awards on their page. And I said, I don't know how we're going to do this. And then I realized Christina's done this before. She's created awards from scratch before. And I asked her, I said, yeah, do you know how many, any idea about creating ribbons? Can you create our ribbons for us so we can put them up on MicroWiki? She was like, how many? I was like, about 30. And she was like, 30? Okay. She said, well, what are we going to do? And I paid her back somehow. I don't know if I paid her in money or if I paid her in creating that the seal for her. But I think there's some way that I was like, hey, scratch our back, I'll scratch your back. And she spent probably about, I think it was about 2 hours creating 30 ribbons, exactly the way that they looked in real life. Uploaded all of them to MicroWiki, and then started building everybody's ribbon bars on there. Helped us build those on the on the micro wiki, and for that we were certainly grateful for, because a lot of people, feel that little tiny things like that don't matter, but for a lot of individuals they do, they do. So those were things that we did for one another, that were definitely a part of the great Cycoldian Draculian era together.
Absolutely. And I can respect that. I remember Christina as well talking fondly of that. So, can you tell me then a little bit more about Christina's process of becoming a citizen? You talked about
Sure.
at the time of the Christmas party, she had already become a citizen, right?
I believe she was already a citizen. I do believe she was. If it wasn't then, I believe it was before she became a member of the Brand District City Council.
Hmm.
Yep. So, but yes. So it was, as I said, either that or before then. But I know it was required because we had asked. Would you be interested? Because we're having some trouble right now with getting a full city council together, and you live in you're a citizen of Brand District. Would you be interested in becoming a city council member of Brand District? And she was like, without a doubt, no problem. I'd love to do that. Love to help out. And she did. And so she was officially sworn in and became a member of the Brand District City Council. Not only the first woman, but also the first trans woman, and that we had in Dracul take a government position. And that right there was something that was admirable and honorable and respected, because as I mentioned previously, Dracul, we're open to everybody. We don't care who you are. Come on in. The door's open to everybody. We do not reject any type of people except pedophiles in Dracul.
So that being the case, one of I think the interesting points to note about this is that Christina, at this point having become a government official in Dracul, is also still the leader of the Cycoldian Empire. So that being the case, the Republic of Psycholia, excuse me. That being the case, had Dracul ever had, or do you have currently, anybody else who's ever been in that position, where they are both a citizen and a government official in Dracul, or even just a citizen in Dracul, and also a government official in their own right, externally?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. I'm actually glad that you asked that. Dracul has had several members of other micronations, especially government officials, serve in the Draculian government. Mainly it was because, again, we want to try to be open-minded. It doesn't matter what position, come on in and help us grow our community. We didn't see any issue with it, of course, at that time. We certainly needed the bodies who were active, who wanted to fill those. We wanted people with experience in leadership as well. So we had several individuals who were in different government positions in other micronations take on those roles.
Very cool. And that being the case, had there ever been any other, excuse me, had there ever been any issues with somebody being a government official in another micronation and being one in Dracul?
Yes, unfortunately, there are issues that we had in the past of that being the case. There have been several times where it has worked out, but most of the time, it just doesn't simply work out, because basically what ends up happening is you have someone from another micronation that's most likely going to be a different government type. So for instance, if you have someone who's a monarch, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Christina in this case. It could be anyone, because we've had several monarchs in Dracul before. When you're a monarch, you feel the need to have the power because you're in such a high prestige position. And I believe at times for some individuals, it can be difficult to shut that off once you step into a different country, because then you're having to play by their rules and their government structure. So there were a couple of occasions where it didn't work out. There were a couple of occasions where it kind of did tread along the lines of treason. Not in Christina's case, of course, but there were some incidents where it was like, okay, I think you're getting a little too powerful now, you get a little too power hungry, and this just isn't going to work. So I think it'd be best that we part ways, that you go your separate way. Some of the individuals did not want to go so quietly. Those resulted in us having to forcefully expel them. But that's only happened on maybe one or two occasions. So that's a fortunate thing where it hasn't happened so much, but yes.
I appreciate that. Giving that context, I feel like also helps. That's, again, something that I want to talk about more in the future. But there is an interesting dynamic between micronations in general and, inter-citizen connection, where citizens of one micronation will be connected to multiple others.
Sure.
That being the case, going back a little bit, do you think you could tell me kind of about the process that someone goes through to become a citizen of Dracul?
Yes, absolutely. So, of course, the individual learns about Dracul. They visit our website. If they have any questions, they can always ask the Department of State, which heads the Department of the Federal Naturalization Service. And then on our website, they go through the citizenship process. They have to download a study guide, which teaches them the history of Dracul, what we stand for, the meaning behind the flag, the colors represent who is in what position in Dracul. Kind of like when becoming an American citizen, you have to take a citizenship test. And when you feel you're ready, you go online and you click on Become a Citizen, and you fill out, you take the 20-question test about Draculian history and who is in what position. And then if you make a 70 or higher on the test, then you get it. You become a citizen. Then you fill out your details, all of your description, height, weight, hair color, eye color, skin, all that sort of thing. So we can basically, because what we do is we take all that information and we put it on a citizenship certificate, just like you would get in any other country. And then we can either digitally send it to you, or we can physically send it to you in the mail. And then you've got a great big Draculian certificate, which I believe, if you don't mind, I have a copy. This is actually one of our older ones. I don't believe we're still using it any longer at the time, because over time designs change and things. But this is one of the most recent ones. I'm gonna put my hand over it because it does belong to somebody. Just hadn't picked it up yet. But basically, see, you've got everything that you possibly need on your Draculian certificate. You have certificate of citizenship, what country they were born in, their complexion, eye color, hair color, if they have any visible markings on them, their signature, and then of course a statement from the Federal Naturalization Service, along with the Federal Naturalization Service Director's signature of approval. And we have a nice little section over here where you can actually take a picture of yourself, cut it out, and glue it onto here, just like they used to do back in the day on many other ones. You can have your picture on it, and then once you get your citizenship certificate, then send out an email, let you know of your approval. If you are of age to vote, then you'll be sent a link to register to vote in Draculian elections. You get your voter registration certificate, which I'm trying to see if I have a copy of one of those. I believe I do right now, but basically it's basically like this, where it has the Dracul state that you reside in, your name, the district, who your representative or who your senator is in your area, who your judge is, if when it's valid, your voter identification number, your year of birth. You get all kinds of fancy stuff like that on your certificate, and then after that, you can sign up to receive Dracul emails about our updates, what's going on, to like us on social media to get updates there too. And then either just kick back, relax, and enjoy being a citizen, or start a business. As a citizen, you have a business. We have several Draculians who actually own businesses in the macro world, and they like to register their business as a Dracul business. For instance, we have a hotel in Galveston where the management has signed up for Dracul's business license. And if you are a Draculian, and this also goes into citizenship as well, if you are a Dracul citizen and you have a Dracul identification card, because we hand out citizen ID cards. You can purchase one as a citizen. You can walk into the hotel and get 10% off your stay. And the management actually honors that. If you're a Draculian, you can get a discount on your stay.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
To be able to connect to a larger business through your nation. That's amazing.
That's right. Absolutely.
Going back a little bit, you brought up the citizenship certificate. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you about it, so the information that's put on there, do people fill that out and then that's how you determine what's put on there, or is it that someone in Dracul puts that information on there?
So when someone applies, when they fill out their citizenship application, the information that they provide on that application is what is then put on the certificate. Okay. And of course we let them know that whatever you provide to us needs to be factual, because we're really going to put it on a piece of paper, on a certificate to give to you, for you to either put in safekeeping, hang up on the wall, whatever the case may be. And our federal naturalization director is the one who puts that information on the certificate when it's being made. And then of course, because it's sensitive information, that information is kept on the Dracul server database. And then we have to go through other vetting procedures. We have to literally through a macro end, run them through a background check to make sure they haven't, committed fraud before, or something like that. And then also have to have them sign a macro confidentiality agreement.
Absolutely. That's interesting. I appreciate the added detail there. As well. So talking about the naturalization director and talking about people's licenses, on Christina's, I actually have here, her sex was marked as transgender. would that have been something that she would have had to have typed in, or would that be something that a naturalization director might put in?
I believe at the time that was something that was an open box, so you could technically type it in. I believe Christina and I actually had a conversation about this because at the time of her becoming a citizen, I didn't know how she wanted to be marked on paper.
Mhm.
At the time, I was running that because we didn't have our naturalization director had resigned to go back to um, macro business.
Mhm.
But it was either transgender because she asked it to be, or because that's what she marked down on the paper, or that's what she told me that she wanted to be marked down. Probably should have said transgender female, but that is something that we typically used to ask if do you want to be male, female, transgender? How do you want it to be marked on the paper? Of course, it doesn't really matter on the paper what is said, because when it comes down to communicating and socializing and having get-togethers and everything, we're going to call you what you want to be called. But I think now it's either just male or female, and if you're transgender, like if you went from male to female, you could just put female.
Okay.
It wouldn't be questioned or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does say on here, Miss Christina Noel. I
Yes.
wanted to ask about that part as well.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Of course.
Sorry about that. In addition,
That's all right.
let's see. Can you tell me, this is kind of going now in left field, can you tell me a little bit about the development of Cycoldia Dracul relations? You talked about the Christmas party, you talked about her citizenship, you talked about her becoming a part of Brand District and its government. What became of official Cycoldia Dracul relations?
So it was mainly after the mutual recognition that we established between one another. It was really after we started getting into actual contact, like I mentioned on Discord, that things really started to develop. There were things such as state ambassadors and stuff like that we had, such as Mr. Charles Ross at the time, who was very good friends with Christina, of course, who flew all the way down from Arizona just to sign a treaty of a land agreement of Nacopotamia between Dracul and Psycholia. And so, of course, I had to work the very next day. But I basically said, you know what, Charles, you go spend all the time you want at Christina's house while I'm working my tail off, making money, and you establish the relations. You bring the Dracul flag with you. It was a really nice state visit because, you had someone who was literally from out of state coming in to visit. Had the national anthems play. Both stood right next to one another with their hand on their heart in respect to each other's national anthem. And the Nacopotamia was signed as a military concession. So basically, if Dracul wanted to use it for training of troops, wanted to do any type of operations with Psycholia's military training, that they would be able to do that. Not really much, if anything, was really done with Nacopotamia, mostly because it was in Christina's subdivision, in her neighborhood subdivision. And when it comes to big cities, especially like Houston, it's very difficult to go into a subdivision and start utilizing their property when you're not a resident of that district. So, for instance, if I'm a resident of Clear Lake District in Houston, I can't go over to the Beverly Hills District and use their pool because I'm not a resident of that district. So with it being a private subdivision, we didn't just want to go wander over there. And I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, I believe there was also a gate that needed a key, and we didn't have key access. So it was it ended up being more of a symbolic gesture from one micronation to another micronation. And so with that being established, doing the nice bits and pieces of prison, military ribbons created, things along those lines. That's pretty much how the relations how they worked out.
Absolutely. And just to make sure that I'm on the same page with that, the name Macopotania, another name for that would be the Dracul Imperton Concession Zone. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
I was just making sure I had the same one. And then as well, one of the things that you touched on earlier, and Christina told us was another aspect of Dracul and Cycoldia's relations was that the Cycoldian military was supposed to have implemented a design for all of their officers and all of their military to go to prison.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Was that another thing that had kind of happened around that time, or was that informal?
So it was more informal. It was more along the lines because prison allows all micronations to be able to go to the academy. We don't want to keep it restricted to just allies. If you truly want to learn military education, we have the veterans to do it. And why should anybody who's trying to grow their micronational military be robbed of that opportunity? So, I let Christina know, of course, at the end after she graduated, if you want to keep sending Cycolians, we'll gladly take them. We'll train them up. We'll turn them into being fighting leaders, and we'll send them right back to you. It didn't end up happening. I believe she has a little bit smaller of a military than we do, which is why it didn't end up happening. That's okay. When it comes to micronationalism, it's not about numbers of military, because you're not actually going out there and fighting somebody. You're not actually having to defend something physically. Unless you live on private property and you get a trespasser, that's a different story, But it was more of an informal thing. If it was a service that they wanted, it was a service that they were going to get.
I appreciate that. That was another thing that had kind of been brought up. So I appreciate the clarification. Going in general about Psycholia and Dracul relations at that point, was there anything that you saw on your part that might have indicated that there could become future tensions, either between Psycholia and Dracul as nations, or between Dracul and Christina as a citizen, or anything like that?
Yes, there were. There were a couple of issues that did kind of spark a little bit of a concern to me. I was trying to be optimistic because, and I don't say this in a negative way, so, I don't want anybody to perceive this as something bad, but Dracul is more of an adult community. Psycholia is more of, of minors. And so, being younger than us, I was like, look, they're younger than us. It's not that big of a problem. Kids do things all the time that adults don't approve of. We don't have any other problems with them. I'm not going to worry about it. It's not that big of an issue. To get into detail about that, basically the first thing that really stuck out, and it was really the first thing. We didn't have any problems before this. What was probably when there was a disagreement between Mr. Cooper and Christina. And I know that was something that you said you had questions about coming up in the interview. But so I won't talk on it too much because then I might already answer the question. But it wasn't anything to do with transgenderism or anything along the lines. I think it was just simple disagreement, like why, you know, why something should be this way instead of that way. I can't remember exactly what their debates were, but it was just general argument, kind of like brother and sister fighting over the most random of things. It was more along those lines. And she had written a statement about Bruce and stating why she disapproved of him, why he did not represent the Draculian community, and why he was not a good fit for representing the government. And I saw that and I was like, Christina, come on, let's not do things like that. I mean, you know, you already asked me to take a look into and talk to Bruce about this, and I did. And after doing that, things settled down. They still had their little bit of tensions here and there. And then, of course, you know, they would, you know, get into disagreement again. There was some incident where Mr. Cooper and Christina didn't get along to the point where Christina was like, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Don't speak to me, don't talk to me. I'm just going to talk to everybody else, and we're just going to go our separate ways. And she said, I want an order, a restraining order, a Draculian restraining order against Mr. Cooper. And our attorney general at the time said, okay, we'll get it typed up. You have a reason for it? Signed out the paper, made it official. They couldn't speak to one another. The problem with that was that during the restraining order, Christina would continue to talk to Bruce, to Mr. Cooper. And we're not talking about nice things. We're talking about things like, for instance, she felt that Mr. Cooper had more, I guess, of a feminine appearance. And because of his hairstyle, he looked like Ellen DeGeneres. And yeah, so
Do you mind if
Go
I
ahead.
pull it? I'm sorry, I just have a picture of Bruce. Do you mind if I show a picture of Bruce? Because we're talking about this person now, and I do have questions, but I would like to be able to show who we're referring to everyone.
Well, I mean, his photo is in the public domain, so I can't really stop you from showing it. But yeah, I wouldn't have an issue with it.
Perfect, I appreciate that. Okay, let me see if I can pull it up real fast.
In Bruce's words, don't make me look bad.
Fair enough, we will try our best. We'll see. There we go. Bruce Cooper, this person.
Yep,
Very
Bruce
cool.
Cooper.
So, that being the case, something about his hair looking like Ellen DeGeneres?
Yes. And so there was, during that whole disagreement, she would continually refer to him as Ellen DeGeneres, and he would ask her not to do that. And it got to the point where that further escalated the tensions between those two. And so we had to step in and say, look, enough is enough. Stop calling him that. Is that enough? No more. Don't call him that. Well, you want to, you know, hurl insults at him or whatever the case may be. Just don't call him that, because he didn't like the interpretation that he was being referred to as a lesbian woman. So, which I can understand. I mean, I wouldn't want someone to refer to that to me either. So there were situations like that that began, and then after that situation, after that finally died down, and they pretty much stopped communicating for the most part along those lines with one another. We had an incident where this goes back to where you asking if we ever had a problem with another micronations leader who was filling a Dracul government role. I'm not going to name the individual because the tensions between us and them are over. There's not really much of an issue. I don't want to bring up any bad blood towards anybody, so I'm just going to refer to them as John in this case. But basically, John was a citizen of Cycoldia, and at the time had been removed from the Draculian government because we felt that he did not have good intentions towards Dracul. There were several government officials that he was attempting to target as Attorney General, and we tried to reason with him on that, and he became more and more aggressive. So John was removed from the community for national security purposes. When John left, he went to Christina and asked Christina, basically in a nutshell, do you have any dirt on Dracul or Draculians or anybody who you don't like in there, because I need it. And Christina, knowing full well what he was up to, because she admitted to me after I found out that she had been working to provide him those documentations, those statements condemning those individuals. She provided those documents to him. And I told Christina, I said, you know, this isn't really behavior that a friend micronation should do to another. You providing documents condemning and basically character assassinating other Draculians could be seen as an international incident, because you're now providing someone who you know doesn't like Dracul documentation to fuel their campaign to speak illy of Dracul while calling us friends. And I told her, I said that, you know, you're very glad that we're not going to do anything about this, because as a friend nation to Dracul, this isn't something that we take lightly, and I wish you would not have done that. And she apologized, and you know, she said she was just trying to do her part, providing information to a Cycoldian. But I had to remind her that while that might have been the case, you're also at the same time aiding in the character assassination of Dracul, your right next door friend, and that's not cool. So that happened, but nothing ever happened of that. John ended up not even pursuing the situation, not even trying to mess with us any longer. He pretty much let bygones be bygones, and he went back and did his own thing. So since nothing ever happened of it, we said, you know what, it's not going to be a problem. We'll let it slide. Christina's our friend. It's not that big of a deal. And then it came to the situation of the whole debate and the issue that we're with today. That's basically where we are, where we stop until the next set of questions.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can't pull up my documents. Excuse me. Oh, they're hidden. That's the problem. Got it. Okay. So, you talked about Bruce Cooper quite a bit.
Yes.
Sorry, my video gave out there. We talked about Bruce Cooper quite a bit. You discussed, you started to see, it seems like, that they had sort of a contentious relationship.
Yes.
That, of course, culminated in a restraining order, which I have, I believe, right here. Was that something, you told me that was something that had been signed and approved by the Attorney General. Was that something that you had approved as well? Was that something that went through your hands at all?
Yes, I did speak with Christina about that situation. I told Christina that that was an option. She did like the idea. She did ask for it. It did get approved. And Bruce was to have no contact with Christina to avoid causing further incidents between the two. And so after that happened, of course, it was to be mutual. Christina not have contact with Bruce, and Bruce not have contact with Christina.
Absolutely. And so then, the article that was brought up, that you mentioned, that Christina had released some documentation to another Cycoldia, and that culminated in some bad press for Dracul. Is that one of the reasons you would consider for the current break in relations?
So let me see if I can understand. You're asking, do I feel that the bad press is the reason for the breakup with Psycholia?
No, my apologies. The fact that she released that document, that incident that happened some time ago, where she released documents to another Cycoldian, and they, from my understanding, printed an article that said something negative about Dracul. Is that one of Dracul's reasons for the current severance of relations?
It was one of the. It wasn't necessarily the reason. It would be basically because the incident that just took place, that incident taking place, and then that being used as an example of it happening previously. So it wasn't the main reason, but it was an example used as that we have already been through this with Christina before in the past, and now it's happened again. So we don't feel that this is going to continue positively, because if she's done it before and now she's doing it again, she might do it again even more. And you don't tarnish your fellow micronation friends. You don't tarnish your fellow allied micronation and expect relations to continue, basically.
And that document, just that article, from my understanding, that wasn't about Bruce, right?
The one that just recently happened?
No, my apologies. The leaked document thing.
I believe it was about Bruce. Yes.
It was about Bruce. Okay.
Yes.
That was something that had been brought up in Christina and I's interview, but there wasn't a ton of detail provided, so I didn't know too much about that. Since it does relate to Bruce Cooper, does Bruce have any other, not any other, because there haven't been any defined yet, but has there been any things that you've seen from Bruce? Talking about there may have been some things from Christina that incited these arguments with Bruce. Was there anything that you felt from Bruce's side, maybe opinions of his or views that he had that were counter to what Christina was advocating?
Not really. When Bruce first came in to Dracul, I'd say maybe about a year and a half to 2 years ago, he'd just come out of dissolving his very first micronation, where he didn't really have many people at all. He was even younger, of course, than he is today, and he had more of an immaturity side to him, as a lot of young kids do, of course. At that age, it's to be expected, of course. It took a while to, through working with Bruce, explaining things, why they need to be done this certain way, the responsibilities of being a part of a government, things like that. It took a little while to get him to the point where he is today, which I believe is at least 80% better than he was when he first came in. And some people might be like, yeah, I don't think so. But if you knew Bruce when he first came into Dracul to where he is today, you definitely would see a major change. Nobody really even wanted to bother him. There would be times where Bruce would come into the Discord and everyone would just disconnect because they didn't want to be around him. But now we've got military veterans having conversations with them almost nightly. And they even put him in the Dracul military. So for that to be the case, he has to be improving somewhat. So
Absolutely. So let me see here as well. Was there a time, in addition to, I've done my questions out of order a little bit.
it's okay.
Was there a time in between the restraining order and some of the initial arguments that Bruce and Christina had, in which Bruce ever issued an apology to Christina?
Yes, there were a couple of times where Bruce was required to make an apology because Christina was was a friend, mutually recognized. As many would call, some people would call an ally. And with us having relations with Psycholia, it was more along the lines of, Bruce, come on, you're a Draculian, let's do the right thing here. Let's issue an apology for any attacks or anything that you said that upset her. And let's try to take a professional approach at this. Because at the end of the day, you're representing Dracul. You're going to represent Dracul. You got to do it the right way. You got to represent it just like the rest of us here. And he did. He wrote an apology and he sent it to Christina.
Absolutely. Was that something that you said there was kind of some potentially some suggestion to that by you hoping to get Bruce to do that, or was that something that Bruce had decided on his own?
It was an order. It was an order to be done because it was necessary, it was appropriate, and it was necessary to basically clear up any bad blood between the two of them, and to try and set tensions, relations between the two of them right. Because when Bruce and Christina first met one another, there weren't all these issues. There was something at one point where it really riled up the two, that really started the arguments. But when they first met for the very first time, they got along quite well, always had conversations, and there were peaks in between the disagreements that they had where they could get along and have regular, casual, respectful discussions with one another. And of course, those are always a joy to see. But, I think, when it comes down to it, you're always going to have drama no matter where you go, because that's just human nature, is pretty much where it is. You always have people with different viewpoints who view things differently, who don't agree with you because of that, and that's what starts drama when the two parties can't, agree with one another.
Makes sense. Jumping forward slightly. So this Christina has these issues with Bruce. They go back and forth. Things sort of resolve there to some extent. Then how does that segue into the Dracul Blue Party debate? What sort of were the circumstances around that? I know you gave us a little bit earlier. But...
Right. Well, I'd like to make it perfectly clear that Bruce Cooper is not a member of the Blue Party. He is a member of the Dracul Guardian Party, which is the political party that I run off of. So I just want to make that. There's no connection really between the topic of the debate and Christina. But basically what led to the issue of the Blue Party and the debate was that Bruce was is an admin, a moderator on the Dracul Discord server, and Bruce was around at the time of the debate. And Christina basically didn't like that there were several things said by Mr. Frederick and then some things agreed upon by Mr. Amalfitano. And she wanted Bruce to be able to take action as an admin against them for the things that they had said. But as Bruce said, this is not really something that I'm going to get into because you both mutually agreed and are taking part in this debate privately as individuals on this server. So I'm not really going to jump in and use my admin privileges because you both mutually agreed to this. So you both are going to have to hear and see things that you're not going to agree with. Now, if somebody personally attacks and uses vulgar language, terrible insults towards someone because of who they are, then that would be different because then that's discrimination and that's not going to be tolerated. But to have a simple debate of two differing opinions, he didn't feel it was necessary to jump in and really do anything as an admin.
Absolutely. So that being the case, were you there during the debate at the time?
I was mostly at work at the time. I peeked in from time to time. I realized that there was a debate going on. It was something that I personally did not want to jump into because eventually I was seeing how heated it was getting and I was like, I don't want any part of this because I'm going to annoy somebody and I don't want to do that. And as the head of state of Dracul, I can't pick sides. I have to be impartial and be neutral in the matter. So eventually I saw that the same things during the debate that were being said were repeating over and over again. And it was now turning into more of just, well, you said this, well, you said that, and this is how you view things. And I said, basically, guys, this debate's going nowhere. And I don't really even find it appropriate to really even taking part on this server. If this is something you want to continue, y'all go do it in a private message somewhere, but I don't feel it's appropriate, especially with all the pings going on, with all the messages y'all are sending out every time a message is sent, that it needs to take place. So I am using my admin power to shut down this debate because it's not going anywhere and it's really starting to heat you guys up. So I ended the debate. That was my part in the debate. And then Christina had gotten upset because I didn't take any action against those individuals for the things that they had said, and basically said that I was silently endorsing their views because I didn't stop it. And I had to, of course, explain to her, again, I have to remain impartial. I'm not picking sides on this. They have the freedom of speech so long as they are not inciting violence towards you. And if you're going to take part in this debate, you're going to hear things at times that you're not going to like or necessarily agree with. And that's basically how I was involved in the debate.
And so you talked a little bit earlier when you first gave your sort of run through of the timeline of everything, a little bit about the Dracul Blue Party.
Yes.
You said that the idea behind it was kind of Christianity and politics, but they don't have an official platform as of now. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. So since we're on that subject, it was understandable that Christina would inquire about that because, as you said, there was no platform. Nobody knew exactly what the positions were for each social issue for that party. So, of course, Christina asked, well, is this going to be, a violation against trans people or LGBT or homosexuals? Is this going to be a problem at all? Are y'all going to try to create laws now and prevent us from holding office or becoming citizens or doing anything at all. And of course, Mr. Frederick told her that there would be no laws attempted to be created or proposed, any bills proposed for creating such discriminatory laws, because that was not part of their mission. It was not going to be a part of their future platform when they created one. And of course, it would be a violation against Draculian law.
Okay, perfect. And so then, you just brought this up right at the end, and I think it's a good segue. So you said that having any law proposed that would be discriminatory against any group of people is against Dracul law.
Correct.
Would Dracul ever allow a party that openly advertised itself as being discriminatory? Not necessarily, I'm attempting to pass laws that are discriminatory. As you said, if it against the law, it wouldn't go through. But could a party say, I am specifically against a certain group of people as my platform?
If the party was to simply say that they disagree with that specific, so like let's use transgenderism as an example, since that's the big topic at the moment. If a political party was to say we don't approve of transgenderism, it's not something that we feel is possible, and that's basically all they said about it, then yes, under the freedom of speech that is provided to Draculians, they would be allowed to have that party. Now, if they tried to pass laws saying that transgender people can't be citizens any longer, or can't hold government positions, or serve in the military, or anything along those lines, that would become problematic. And that would be certainly a situation where it would go from, having a personal view to personally attacking now. And of course, that we wouldn't stand for. If it attempted to be passed, it would probably be shut down and rejected by the other senators in Parliament. If it somehow, which I don't see how it would pass, the Senate, it would then go to the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court would certainly strike that down. And then, of course, if going back to that, if it didn't go to the Supreme Court first and it came to my desk, then I would certainly veto that bill. I would shut that bill down.
Absolutely. But somebody could have the platform of it. That being the case, could you, to bring it to a logical extension, could you do the same thing just as a platform, just as an advertising statement, do it with other things like race?
So really, again, it boils down to if you do not actively target and try to attack anyone, let me rephrase that. If you do not try to actively seek violence or discrimination against an individual, if you're not trying to do that, then it is permitted under the freedom of speech. But the moment you act and try to target, attack, create violence, terrorism, fear mongering, anything along those lines, that's where it breaks the law, and we're not going to tolerate that.
And that line is determined by the Supreme Court? Is that determined by your office as to what discrimination is, what constitutes targeting?
Yeah. So basically, in any act, whether it be physical, it could also be virtual, like sending threatening messages, sending messages that are discriminatory, like you're subhuman, you're not a human, you have a mental illness, you shouldn't be alive, you should be dead or killed, or anything along those lines. That right there fits into the executive order or not the executive order. That fits under the line of terrorism. I have gotten me confused because I had recently created an executive order that said pedophilia is now considered terrorism in Dracul. And so, of course, with that terrorism word being in there, I got confused. But yeah, it would be between the Constitution and, of course, the Supreme Court upholding that. We can't stop people from believing in what they want to believe in. But if you're going to take your beliefs and you're going to discriminate against other people or try to attack them, we're not going to tolerate that.
Absolutely. So, to continue on, during that debate itself, to kind of go back to the topic of that night, um, Christina talked about at one point during our interview that part of what bothered her was that when she asked and inquired about specifics of their party's platform, that one of the members, I believe it was Carl Frederick, sent in whatever medium, the Discord chat or the place that they were in, sent a link to a video that he said summarized their views and their platform.
Okay.
Do you have knowledge of that?
I do not.
You do not. Okay.
I do not.
Would you mind if I played a snippet from the video?
Yes.
Okay.
That's fine.
I would appreciate it. It was just there was a particular thing that she felt had been part of it that had bothered
Yes,
her.
absolutely.
And it was relevant to what they discussed, I believe, last night. Let me actually share my screen with you real quick, so that way we can have it go live. So I did check this with Christina. She says it is the video that was sent to her. I would be curious to see if Dracul could verify this. But it is, should Christians get involved in politics? Dr. Frank Turek. For anybody who wants to get the full context of this, you should go and watch the full video yourself. I don't feel the need to go through the 9-minute video, but I'm just going to play the part that was of particular interest, I felt. Again, if you feel like I'm not being fair to the video and I'm not showing the full context, please go back and look into yourself and tell me if it's something I should talk about at length.
Sure.
Okay, so can you see this all right?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me know if you can hear it as well.
Unless we stand strong against this current movement. Because wherever same-sex marriage is put into law, the Bible becomes hate speech. And Christians become bigots. It's total nonsense, as we'll see in future nights. It's not bigotry at all, it's good common sense. But they throw all this at you. And legally, they're going to begin taking away our rights to practice our religion freely and to practice our free speech rights. In fact, there is a law working its way through Congress right now called the Hate Crimes Law. And that hate crimes law will basically make anyone who opposes homosexuality potentially liable for hate crimes.
Now, that was the main passage I wanted to get to. It's not appropriate for me to be smiling at the moment. The only reason I'm smiling is because that music gets me every time I've heard this.
Oh yeah, it's like, why would you choose that kind of music with this type of video?
It seems weirdly placed, but this is not a video that's associated with Dracul in any way. This is something that was just used as a reference in a conversation.
I see.
That being the case, it was something that I think had led into a larger debate that Christina and I think Carl Frederick were having that night with regard to same-sex marriage. It again seemed like at a certain point, if I can get out of this, and yep, there we go, connect back with you, it seems at a certain point you had heard at some point about Carl Frederick or somebody arguing about a same-sex couple's ability to parent a child. Is that accurate?
Yes, there was a point where that was brought up by Mr. Frederick. He felt that there was a difference, from what I understood, he felt that there was a difference between uh, same-sex couples and heterosexual couples, parenting styles and parenting successes.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind me bringing up right now, this
Yes.
is a screenshot of a discussion between you and Christina, where you had actually sent an article to her privately, showing that to not be true. And I believe that was in the context of that discussion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. And so then you both kind of continue to talk about that. So, um, what what is your opinion on that?
Well, as the of course clearly sending those articles to Christina, I believe that it doesn't matter if you're homosexual, bisexual, transgender, or straight. I think it really all depends on the upbringing of you as a person throughout your life. If you had a successful upbringing, or if you didn't have a successful upbringing, and you decide to um, parent properly and change and be different from the way your parents brought you up, then anybody can be able to raise a family. There of course are certain individuals who don't necessarily see that as likely or possible, but I personally believe that, because clearly I sent those articles to Christina to use in her debate against Mr. Frederick, because she see if there was anything on the internet that there would be to back her claims. That there would be no problems. It wouldn't matter who was raising children, anyone could do it. And I found that article, so I sent it to her.
Absolutely. And so then you had kind of, at least privately, kind of supported Christina's position in that argument. Would you say?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it was, and again, it wasn't something that I was going to put out publicly, because, it was a one-on-one conversation between her and I. And again, as a head of state, I try I try to be impartial towards all viewpoints, because at the end of the day, as the head of state, I'm representing everybody of all viewpoints. And if I choose one side, then the other people are going to feel left out, neglected, betrayed, or feel that their leader is not fully for them. And we can't have that in a nation where we welcome everybody to have a leader pick one side.
Mhm. But there are obviously certain issues that Dracul does take specific issues on, like you've stated several times, things like pedophilia, terrorism, things of that nature.
Correct. Which, you'd have to be a fool to not be on board with, because who in their right logical mind is going to support pedophilia,
Agreed. I think that's a pretty easy, uncontroversial opinion. I would say, that being the case, though, when you say you represent everybody, you would, I assume, say that you don't represent those people. So, are there particular issues that you feel like heads of state should take sides on?
Just the pedophilia, pretty much, and the terrorism. When it comes to personal, disputed social issues like LGBT or immigration or drag queens or anything along those lines, anything else that is really a big hot button topic right now in social issues, I think it's probably best for heads of state to try to remain impartial on that, especially the government as a whole. You don't want to pass laws siding with one or the other. You let the people come together and decide what Dracul is going to represent. And so, if you have Draculians come together, and some, like transgenderism, and some don't, then, those two need to come together and either put aside their differences and unite under a one common goal that they can all agree on. And if not, then it's difficult to say that Dracul represents one thing. That's the thing. When you get people with different viewpoints come into any micronation, any country, I mean, just look at the United States and everything, all the problems that it's having, for instance, with so many people with different views on different social issues. You get basically a mess. So I don't think that the government or its head of state should be taking any position on one or the other side, but should remain impartial to represent everybody when it comes to general discussion and general representation.
And what determines, I suppose, in your mind, what is defined as general? Like, for example, you said certain laws couldn't be passed to discriminate against people. If someone tried to pass a law that, treated in some way people of different races differently, or people of different sexual orientations, so on and so forth, is that possible? Can that be created in Dracul?
To discriminate? No, absolutely not. As I said before, you can think it, but the minute you try to act on it and violate somebody else's, privacy, to violate their pursuit of happiness, whatever the case may be, you personally attack them, you yell racial slurs at them or anything along the lines like that. No, absolutely not. We're not going to tolerate that because, again, Dracul represents everybody. And if we were to allow something like that to happen, we would basically be dealing with, the 1950s, 60s Jim Crow laws. And we're certainly not going to take any position on that. Because I believe you're from the macro state of Alabama. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so then you know the history of how badly that ended.
Absolutely. But I guess that's the thing that I feel like is interesting about Dracul's stance, and I want to understand more about, because for myself, I would say in regard to racial issues, in regard to, for example, the context of Jim Crow South in Alabama, it's not that my office doesn't take a side. It very staunchly does. It says, that was wrong. Where, and I think this is a fair question to ask any micronation because it's a hard one. But where does that line get drawn, and who draws it?
Right. As I had said, the line is drawn on when an individual attempts to act on their disagreement towards another individual in the name of violence, personal attacks, and slander. So, like, for instance, if you were transgender and I said, you need to go die, or you don't belong here, you're a terrible person, get out of here, or I'm going to pass a law that makes sure that you will never serve in the government ever again. That's where the line is drawn, because then you are taking your views, turning them into violence and discrimination, and then trying to enact on them to basically persuade and have the view of Dracul all representing that. And that is determined, of course, by the Constitution. And of course, a law like that would have to be decided upon by the Parliament. And then if there was an issue with that bill, I would have to probably get involved. And then, of course, the Supreme Court would strike that down as unconstitutional.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you kind of digging into that topic a little bit more for me. We only have about 20 more minutes left with President Luke, so If you don't mind, President Luke, I'm going to kind of roll through a few questions that
Sure,
I want to
sure.
hit on. So, um, talking about the meeting that happened, um, saying that as you saw with the video that was shown and with your messages to Christina, it obviously seems that you don't support the Blue Party's stance on that. Being president, you said um, you didn't step in and you didn't say something because you feel it's important for you to be impartial, I believe. And then I guess all of that kind of brings up a question for me. As the president of Dracul, do you feel that your action or lack of action define the nature of what Dracul stands for? Even if you try to stay impartial in something, can the act of being impartial make a statement about what Dracul stands for, what it stands against?
I think as long as people understand that the reason for the president remaining impartial is because he doesn't want to pick sides and he doesn't want to cause further of an issue, as long as that's understood by everybody, that it is not the president's job to pick sides on who's right or who's wrong, but it's his job to lead the people and keep his community active and prosperous. I think that right there pretty much sums it up. I don't believe that taking action or not taking action necessarily points a direction specifically on how the president feels about a certain situation. There might be times where the president might want to say, okay, well, because this is such a humongous giant issue, that, I guess, I feel it's my duty to let people know my personal view. When president does something like that, it's starting to pick sides again. And, yeah, everybody who has a viewpoint is going to want the president to back them up because he's the head of state. Everybody would want that. Well, pick me, I'll pick my side, But I think it's irresponsible for the president to pick a side because at the end of the day, it's not the president's job to get involved in social issues. It's the president's job to lead his people.
And so that moves on to sort of the aftermath of the debate, I suppose, and the ultimate culmination to the severing of ties between Dracul and Cycoldia.
Yes.
So, am I correct in saying that the inciting incident diplomatically was based around Christina's initial production of an article in Cycoldia about Draculian officials?
Yes.
And those officials were Bruce Cooper, Isidoro, Carl Frederick. Well, was Carl Frederick a part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Carl
part of the Blue Party because he was the one who sent the video that we had gone over.
Was he a part of her actual address, though? Like the people that she...
Yes. I'm not sure if he was or not. I believe he was, but I've only read over it just 2 or 3 times.
Sure.
But it should be Carl, Izzy, Bruce, and myself. And if it's not Carl, then it's Izzy, Bruce, and me.
Absolutely. I wanted to make sure I had the people right. And then, so when did you find out that Christina had posted that statement on your administration or on those people in the government?
I believe it was brought to my attention by one of our government officials. I believe either they saw it on her website or on MicroWiki. I can't remember where it was, but it was brought to my attention. I took a look at it, I read everything that it was saying. It was saying things along the lines of, you know, hate speech, transphobia, homophobic, things along those lines. I took a quick gander through all of the chat logs from that big entire debate that went down. I didn't see any personal attacks of any name calling, slurs or anything along those lines. I basically looked at everything and said, this is a disagreement between three people who have different viewpoints, who just aren't seeing eye to eye, and it's unfortunately gotten heated. And, that's pretty much the reason why I shut the debate down in the first place. And continued to read through that. And then I got to the part where she had mentioned me as silently endorsing their viewpoint from the opposing party because I did not remove those individuals from government office, which, as I mentioned previously, they weren't even in the government office yet because this was 2-3 days before I had gotten sworn in. But I said they are voicing their opinion. If they were to have attacked you, if they were to have incited violence against you, if they were to have used slurs against you, discriminate against you, anything along those lines, then yes, I would definitely have a problem with that. I'm not going to tolerate any discrimination. But just because they have a difference in view with you doesn't mean that they're personally attacking you. On the contrary, the individuals in the debate continue to call her Christina, continue to use her he, she pronouns, and the thing is that even to this day, a lot of people don't know this, but to this day, when we have conversations in Dracul with one another, whether it be in voice chat, text, whatever the case may be, if there's ever a time where Christine is brought up, we still to this day refer to her by her pronouns, she and her, and by her name Christina, and continue to recognize her as a monarch because it is the right thing to do. And not only that, but it is not personal. It is not, even Mr. Frederick calls her she and her and Christina. And so does everybody else. Because to them, to Mr. Frederick and to others, it was a debate of two different opposing sides and nothing more. They didn't see it as a personal attack. They didn't want to make her angry. The subject of their personal views were brought up. They partook in it. And to them, that was it. But they thought that it was going to be done and over with, that they'd be able to say, let's maybe not talk about this conversation, this subject anymore. Let's talk about the things we can agree on. And that was basically how they thought things were going to happen afterwards. Okay, we had a really heated, really good debate. We got some good points in there. We ended up just going around and around at the end, so it was cut off. That's pretty much that.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you kind of recounting that for us.
Right.
I have only a few more minutes with you. Do you think you would be able to stay for 2 or 3 more questions? Maybe run over just a little bit.
Yeah.
I would appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So let's see here. So when Christina brought up the discussion of the release that she made, she said that she had sent some prior notice to some Draculian official. Did you have any awareness of that by chance?
As in statements regarding the issue?
So I want to make sure that I remember this correctly, and if I don't, I will come out in the video and say that I had an error here. But I believe she said in her interview that before she sent out the initial article on yourself, Isidoro, Bruce, and I think that, and potentially Carl,
Yes.
that she had sent, before she did that, she had sent someone in your administration or your government a prior notice saying, hey, I'm about to send this out.
I do believe that when that was sent out, that was the time when I told her that this wasn't a good idea, that we should talk about this, that if any action was necessary to be taken against them, take it, and that this is a private matter, and we don't need to take a matter which was in Dracul, as you operating as you said at the time, a citizen, and then going to Cycoldia as the monarch and releasing that, because that's what creates an international issue, and I don't think it's such a good idea. I think that was at the time that I mentioned that to her.
Okay. And then from there, Christina and Cycoldia went on to publish this article.
Correct.
So when Dracul decided that their official position, your official position, was to step away from Cycoldia-Dracul relations, did you give any notice to Christina or to Cycoldia before making that public?
So yes. So I basically informed her that because of the incident, and because, as I had mentioned previously, because we had an incident before in the past, that it was probably not a good idea. I was very respectful about it. I was not aggressive with her. I told her, I said, it's probably best that we cool down, step aside, and then maybe in a couple of months when things get better, we can come back again, put our differences aside, and try to make this work again. And unfortunately, it ended up a debate trying to be started between Christina and I on why this was done, this shouldn't be done. We haven't done anything wrong, sorts of things like that. And I kept trying to tell her, look, if you're going to have us as a friend, if you're going to see Dracul as a friend, when you have disagreements with other individuals, and you go and you make those public in another micronation that had absolutely nothing to do with it, and you try to tarnish their reputations because they didn't agree with your point of view, and you know that ultimately will not only try to character assassinate them, but reflect negatively on us, that's not going to be something positive that your friend is going to see. It is conduct unbecoming of an ally. And I have warned you before in the past that making actions and statements and releasing them publicly just because you have a disagreement is not the way to go about doing things. And that is basically what led to us making the decision of, well, it hasn't happened once, it hasn't happened twice, it's now happened 3 times where she's either said something negatively about Draculians or has aided someone else who didn't like Dracul in the tarnishing, in the attempted tarnishment of Dracul or Draculians. And, we have to approach this in a better way when there are disagreements. We can't just, shit talk one another because we don't like what's being said. We need to put our differences aside and focus on the things like our Christmas parties, like croissant, like ribbon building together. We need to focus on what brings us together as friends, as allies, not focus on the things that we can't agree on together. But the article was still published, and that's, of course, when I mentioned that we need to take a break from one another. And I even told her that. I said, this doesn't need to be forever. I don't intend for this to be forever. This needs to be a break. We need to recollect our thoughts and come together and find out what is going to work for all of us. Because at the end of the day, like I had mentioned to you before, previously when the interview started, who wants to have an adversary or who wants to have someone with disagreement 1 mile from them? And I told her that my door was always open if she had any problems whatsoever. And there were times that she did come through my door when there were problems, like for instance with Mr. Cooper, and setting up of the restraining order, and having him issue his apology for his conduct and such. But we felt it was best that she needed to learn that we weren't going to be bullied anymore. We come on. You really going to invite somebody over for your Christmas party if you don't like them? You got a high amount of respect for Christina. And the fact that she basically took those articles and published them, knowing well that it would not be very pleasant for us, basically felt like a spit in the face to us and our friendship and all that we had accomplished over the years and the good times that we had had. And that's why we felt it was necessary to take a break from relations until things could blow over.
Again, I appreciate that. I have, if you don't mind, two more quick questions for you. And then at the end, I'd like you to make a statement if you want about just kind of summarizing everything, your
Sure.
feelings at this moment. So the last two, there was a statement that you put out, or that was that Christina had brought up during our interview, where you were quoted as saying that you felt like Christina may not have cared about Dracul. Do you remember that statement? And if so, do you still stand by that?
Yes and no. No, because there were things that she did before Dracul, which of course I can through this interview, because again, credit earned is credit given. And if someone's going to do something to earn credit, you need to give it to them, whether you're having a problem with them or not. There were several things that Christina had done for Dracul. But, when I say simply that she did not care, it was more along the lines of a lot of times when Christina would come into Dracul's Discord, there weren't many times where Christina would ask how Dracul was doing. There weren't really many times that she would ask if there was anything that she could do to help. It felt like since the last time she helped us, it was really becoming less and less caring. Like she was just there. Like she didn't want to really prosper her ally or her friend, Dracul, of course, that is. Not me as an individual, but Dracul. A lot of the times it was spent with her talking about herself and the things that she was doing. And it kind of rubbed us the wrong way because it was like, well, it's great that you're here, but every time you come in, we're only hearing about you. So how do you think we're going to feel when you don't ask us how we're doing? You don't ask, is there anything you can do for Dracul? Hey, do you want to meet up? Do you want to have some type of state visit again? Let's go do something in Aeternia. Nothing like that was ever mentioned. So it felt like she didn't care to many of us. Now, I can't say that that is her intention, because I don't know what nobody knows what someone's thinking. But it felt that way. And so to answer your question, yes to some aspects, but certainly no to others. It's kind of a mismatched kind of question answer.
Absolutely, but I can still respect that. I think that's a fair answer.
Yes.
The last question that I have for you here. You've talked a lot about Dracul-Cycoldia relations. You've talked a lot about your personal connection to Christina, and we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the interview, and it's come kind of full circle now. How does this break in relations affect your relationship personally with Christina? How has it affected it? And what do you what do you think this says about micronations and friendship?
Well, I think that people should understand that there can be and there should be a difference between micronations, relations, and personal macro friendships. Um, do I hate Christina? Absolutely not. I don't have any ill intent or any pleasure in her pain or anything along those lines of her as a person and as a friend. And I explained this to her actually the night of, through direct message. I hit her up one more time. This was the night that y'all had y'all's interview. And I basically said, Christina, you might not believe this, but I still am your friend. This is a macro issue that we're currently dealing with. But outside of micronationalism, I don't have a problem with you because you as an individual have not harmed me as an individual. This was conflict between two micronations and the actions taken between the both of them. As I had mentioned to you before, right before the interview happened, if Christina had called me tonight at 11 o'clock, hey, my ride never showed up. I'm stuck at a store. I can't get home. I can't find a ride. Parents aren't answering the phone. Would you come and pick me up? Most certainly. Because that is the humility, the human in me. And of course, I would expect in her, of course, too. Well, if she had a car, of course. That I would go and rescue her in this 36-degree weather while she's standing outside to get her home, because I can put micronational issues on one side and personal relations and friendships on the other side. If she hit me up tonight and said, hey man, how's it going? How's work going? You doing all right? They give you that pay raise yet at work? I wouldn't have a problem having a conversation about that. If it got into micronationalism, it might be a little bit shaky at the moment. But on a personal level, no, I don't believe it. Christina feels that the two are stuck together. And she's made it clear that she feels that the two are stuck together. But, I know she's going to watch this if she isn't already. And I'm clearly here saying this in front of everybody and everyone else who will watch it. I don't have a problem with Christina as a person or as a friend. I still wanted to consider her a friend and even handed out the olive branch of peace to her to maintain that friendship. But she told me the night that she had the interview with you that she could not believe that was hard to believe, that simply wasn't something that could happen. So I said, okay, well, I tried. There's nothing more you can do but try. And that's pretty much my view on that.
Absolutely. And then to summarize things, I suppose, do you have any final statement you want to make? I know you kind of did something similar a moment ago, but do you have any message you'd like to send to Christina, to Cycoldia, to Draculians, to anybody watching this stream at 11:43 p.m.?
Yeah. Right. I guess the best thing to say is keep your your micronational issues separate from your friendship. Know the difference between having a personal issue with someone and your government having an issue with someone else's government. It can be possible, and it could have been possible between Christina and I, but unfortunately, she didn't see it that way. On another note, always be careful with the actions you take against your fellow friendly micronations. Always ask yourself, especially if there's conflict between your micronation and another, could the things that I'm about to do reflect negatively on the individual nation I call a friend? And if so, is that an action that I am confident and comfortable with executing? And is the outcome something that I'm willing to take? The consequence, whether it be positive or negative, is the consequence something that I'm willing to face? And whether it be a break of relations, disagreement or hostilities from the micronational community, whatever the case may be, ask yourself whenever there's disagreement with another micronation, am I willing to suffer the consequences that could take place from the actions I'm about to take? And is there something else I should be considering before taking such actions? And I guarantee you, if you do just that, there's a really good chance you might just salvage and prevent conflict with someone whose micronation you've been friends with for quite some time.
Absolutely. I think that's well said. Again, I know we've kept you over your time a little bit, but I really do appreciate you, President Luke, meeting with us. We talked a bit before the stream about potentially having you on again and other Draculians, and I would definitely like to do that and continue some conversations with Dracul in the future.
And not only that, but, since we're on the topic of that, we invite everybody. Come on over to Dracul. You don't have to become a citizen, but just stop on by, see what we're all about. We've got nothing to hide. Our arms are open to everybody. Yeah, there's going to be some things that people don't agree with on certain issues, as we clearly talked about tonight. But when it comes down to coming together as a community, not talking about social issues, making friends with other people, making a community work, a nation work together, we find the common ground every single time to come together, especially during every one of our holidays, and to, reasons as to be proud of our fellow Draculian. We might not agree with them on some things, but we sure will find a hell of a lot more to agree with them on than we disagree, because that's what community is all about. At the end of the day, the community is basically one big giant family. So if you want to stop by during one of our events, if you want to stop by our Discord, have a chat, see how things are, come on by. We're not going to reject anybody, except if you're a pedophile.
Absolutely. Do you have any plugs you want to make with that? YouTube, Discord, Twitter, Instagram.
What was the question?
Sorry. Do you want to plug anything? Do you want to say go to this to find us? Where can people learn more about you?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm so not used to doing these sorts of things. I didn't know that was going to come up. Yes. Our website, draculgov.com. That's our main website. We got everything you want to learn about Dracul on there. Draculgov.com. We're on MicroWiki. We have the MicroWiki Discord server, which you can get an automatic invite on the front homepage of our website. We're DraculGov on Twitter and Instagram. And if you have any questions, you can email services@draculgov.com. That's our citizen services, general services email address. And we have a contact form on the website too, if you don't know who to contact. And that's pretty much it. But, really, we're just a nation that is continuing the legacy and history of Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, Dracula. That's our big main focus. We certainly invite anyone to come and help us out on that, because we want to start a historical society on finding history, lost history of Vlad the Impaler. It's a big one. Can't lose history. And a community that wants to unite under one flag for the greater good. And that's pretty much it.
Very cool. Well, again, thank you so much, President Luke. I'm going to let everybody go who's live now, but I appreciate you all attending, and we will be back soon. Take care, everybody.
Take care.